It's a really powerful piece of technology that does a lot more than what it's currently doing. One of the things it does is it can see when you're there.
Is Google one step closer to becoming Big Brother? The internet giant is acquiring Nest, a company that makes smart thermostats and smoke alarms.
Nest could give Google a massive stream of interesting data about what people do in their homes.
The data that we collect is all about our products.
Tech products are more and more pervasive in our lives and more raising concerns about the ability of companies to track personal information.
The question of what auto companies are doing with information gathered by GPS systems in a car.
Some say the black box could become a Pandora's box of Fourth Amendment violations against unlawful search and seizure.
So when you're going to a supermarket, they can tell when you're going to a grocery store, they can tell when you're going to a department store.
The line between anonymous and the companies knowing who you are is very thin because there's lots of ways to know.
If you're shopping with your smartphone, chances are that someone is keeping track of your habits. Many stores are now using your phone to secretly watch you shop.
The companies say, trust us, we just want to sell you stuff. But you know what? This is too important to just trust. So we need transparency. We need to know that someone is watching the watcher.
Welcome to Real News Investigates. Surveillance. It's a controversial issue that over the course of recent months has had more than its fair share of coverage and caused equal amounts of controversy. When Americans discovered last May that the U.S. government was monitoring their texts, phone calls, and emails, the outrage that ensued was justified. But what if it's not just the government watching you, learning what you do and when you do it? Every day, private companies are collecting data about us as we use internet-connected phones, computers, and yes, even ordinary household items. In fact, many experts believe the so-called Internet of Things, a term for everyday objects that send data through the internet, will soon surpass the number of smartphones, tablets, and computers in existence. As technology advances, privacy seems to be eroding. Tonight, we'll examine the very real privacy fears that come along with our increasingly connected digital world. Google, one of the world's most powerful tech companies, recently paid $3.2 billion to acquire Nest, a company that produces smart thermostats and smoke detectors, but not much else. Nest's products sound great. They let you set the temperature in your home remotely with your smartphone. They also learn your energy habits and can adjust accordingly. But if you're wondering why Google paid so much for a thermostat company, it goes beyond that, as tech expert Lance Ulanoff recently explained.
One of the things it does is it can see when you're there. That's part of how it does some of its smarts. So, I mean, it's the world's biggest and most powerful database and knows the most about everybody connected to the best, maybe one of the best smart home devices.
What do you mean it sees you? I mean, is there a sensor on it, like an alarm, or what is that?
Absolutely a sensor. So it can sense when people are in the rooms.
You can understand why this worries privacy advocates. Google, which already has our email, our search history, and much more, now conceivably has the means to know where we are, even within the privacy of our own homes. It can quite literally watch us by looking at Nest's data. But Nest's co-founder insists that won't happen yet.
The data that we collect is all about our products. We are going to be total and improving them. If there were ever any changes whatsoever, we will be sure to be transparent about it, number one, and number two, for you to opt into it.
It's not just Google and Nest, though. Power companies already have a window into the home activities of many Americans through smart meters. Now, these are devices that allow them to monitor and control electricity use in homes wherever they're installed. Despite fierce opposition from some privacy advocates, smart meter installation continues, with the government just investing another $14.3 million to implement its smart energy grid. But our phones, of course, remain the easiest way for companies to learn about us. A recent report in the Wall Street Journal revealed one of the newest and most controversial ways they do this. It's called location analytics. According to the Journal, a Toronto-based company called Turnstile is building profiles of shoppers at retail stores by tracking their locations as they connect to free wireless internet, which is installed in the stores by Turnstile. From that, the company can learn where and when you shop, how long you shop there, and even your other daily habits like where you eat, drink coffee, or work out. Most of the 3.5 million potential customers Turnstile has tracked are in Canada, but this is also being done in the U.S. by companies like Retail Next, ShopperTrack, and Euclid Analytics. Euclid has tracked more than 50 million devices in 4,000 locations, according to the New York Times. More than 80 companies around the world do this, and although they insist the shopper profiles they create are anonymous, even retailers who use the services seem to understand how unnerving the practice would be if shoppers knew about it. One retailer who uses Turnstile said, "It would probably be better not to use this tracking system at all if we had to let people know about it. It's not invasive. It might raise alarms for no reason." As things stand now, they don't have to let people know they're being tracked. But there is a growing push to change that. Senator Al Franken has promised to reintroduce his Location Privacy Protection Act, which would restrict tracking, but not because of tracking of shoppers. Instead, his effort is fueled by concerns about the auto industry. Listen to what Ford sales exec Jim Farley said at the Consumer Electronics Show in January.
By the way, we know everyone who breaks the law. We know exactly when you do it because we have a GPS sensor in your car. We know where you are, and we know how fast you're driving. But seriously, we don't supply that data to other people either.
Although Farley later retracted that statement, the damage was done. And a new GAO survey of 10 car makers and navigation companies tells a similar story. From the report, 4 companies told us that they keep the location data in a format that is associated with an individual vehicle, yet do not allow consumers to delete their data or request their deletion. In such cases, consumers are unable to prevent the retention or use of retained data should they wish to do so. In other words, companies are keeping your data and you can't do anything about it. Private companies are gathering data from our cars, tracking us while we shop, and even collecting data from inside our home. For now, avoiding it is inconvenient, but not impossible. But as technology develops exponentially, so too will data gathering, and what then? Some companies are even making efforts to protect consumer privacy. In November 2013, a group of location analytics companies, including Turnstile and Euclid Analytics, signed a code of conduct to promote customer privacy and transparency for mobile location analytics. So as privacy fears grow, many companies assure us, don't worry, we're only collecting the data that's necessary. Now that might seem reasonable, but my next guest has firsthand experience with an invasion of her privacy. Thelma Tormina's power company tried to install a smart meter in her home, but she fought back. She'll share her concerns next. Thelma Tormina personally prevented the installation of a smart meter on her home and is now fighting power companies trying to install smart meters across Texas. Thelma, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Buck.
So please just tell us your story. What happened? You were at your home and you saw a representative of the power company doing what, and what happened then?
Well, actually, he came up my driveway and I told him that I did not want a smart meter. So he said he was going to call his supervisor and disappeared. The next thing I knew, he was jumping over my back fence. When he did, I was standing in front of my meter and he shoved me 7 different times in my own backyard. And I was going to go call the police and headed to the house, and he said by the time I got back he'd have the meter installed. So instead I went and I got my pistol, warned him that I was going to get it, and he didn't believe me, and I went in and got it, and he went back over the fence faster than he came over the first time.
So he's on private property at your home, lays hands on you, refuses your requests as the homeowner to leave the premises, and then only when you drew a pistol was he willing to actually leave. What did the power company,
yes.
What did the power company say about this? I assume you brought it to their attention. This is rather strange behavior.
Yes, actually my husband immediately, he came home and he immediately got on the phone with Centerpoint. He told them what had happened, and they asked if we had gotten a name, and we said no. First thing we found out was that he was supposed to notify us who he was and what company he was with, which he never did. And in addition to that, he called the police and tried to press charges against me. The district attorney would not file charges because he was actually trespassing once he was told he wasn't to come onto the property.
Now, you successfully challenged this. What are your concerns? What was it that brought you to be so clear in your desire not to have a smart meter installed? What are you worried about happening?
My concern about the smart meters in general is the loss of privacy, the invasion and the intrusion into our personal lives, the capability of the power industry to be able to control our power. In addition to that, I'm very concerned about what's called Connect the Americas 2022, which is a design to connect all power grids to one big power grid so that we can share power with other nations across the world.
Now, Texas obviously has a different grid system than the rest of the country. Have you been able to at least get the word out, or any members of the Texas state legislature taking this up? Are they taking it seriously, or is it still at a point where people just don't seem to know enough about it if they're going to oppose it?
No, they're taking it seriously. A handful of Texans have at least convinced the PUC that they must allow consumers who do not want a smart meter to be able to opt out. The problem is what they're charging, the fees are astronomical in order to convince people not to opt out. In addition, we also have an appeal that's headed into the courts because we petitioned the PUC of Texas 3 different times for a public hearing on this issue, and they have denied us 3 times. According to their rules, they must give us a public hearing, and they're not doing so.
All right, Thelma, thank you very much for joining and sharing your story. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Buck.
I'd now like to welcome Kamal Ravikant. Kamal is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and partner at Evolve VC, an early-stage startup fund. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Buck.
So my understanding is that you see the benefits as well as the drawbacks of this. First, give us the good aspects of using this sort of smart meter technology. What is it about this that you think is worthy of at least more consideration and perhaps more regulation?
Well, you know, the smart meters actually fundamentally comes down to what we call the Internet of Things, you know, where basically you have devices that are gathering data and getting smarter and smarter fundamentally to help the consumer, serve the consumer. Like Nest, for example, why people like the product that Google just bought for a lot of money, the company that they bought. You know, what Nest does is actually like automatically figure out how you use your power and adjust for like when you are in your home, when you're not, what you're doing. And so the trend is basically so that people have to think less, and the devices and the data that they gather actually are used for their benefit. So it basically technology gets out of your way. You know, using algorithms and data to get technology out of your way.
So there is a utility to this, there is a convenience to this technology, but can you see, we just had a guest on a minute ago who was expressing her concerns that this could be used for government intrusion and really government regulation of our everyday lives in ways that would have been unforeseeable before this technology came about. How do you assess that concern?
I mean, fundamentally, government can intrude it any way they want. I mean, look at the NSA. Right, that's not technology's problem. That's a government issue. That's not the problem of the companies that are coming out with these devices. They're fundamentally any device that gathers data that creates a better device or better use case for the consumer is good. Now, a government can hack into it. Government can do legislative. They can do whatever they want, which is actually a sad state of society.
Well, we don't think that that's a good thing, and obviously the Constitution would prevent them or should prevent them from doing much of that. But I understand, I believe the point you're making here is that this is something that the legislative process has to take off. If people want power companies not to be gathering this data, then they can't rely on the power companies themselves, because as this becomes more available, as it becomes cheaper, as it becomes an economic incentive for the companies to gather this data, just like all these other tech giants are doing with our email, our cell phones, and everything else, then they're going to do it. So you're saying that this is something that, yes, it's convenience, but also at the same time, if we want it to stop, we can't rely on the slowing of technology. Therefore, it has to be done through public discourse and the legislative process.
Really well put. I mean, basically, what is the fundamental American export? It's innovation, right? And if you stifle innovation at the level it's happening, which is at the private enterprise, you know, we're going to stifle the economy. Now, as far as, you know, how it's used, that's why we have the legislative process. That's why we have the media, you know, to actually make those issues come into light. And that's how the system works.
Would you say that we are quickly, rapidly approaching a time at which, just as now it seems so much of our lives are on the internet and we can do so much with that relatively new technology, much of our household items are going to be falling under the same control? Much of our household items are going to be part of the same web, if you will. Our lights, our electricity, our thermostats, all of this will be interconnected, and therefore we'll have to find ways to protect that data because it will be available to someone.
You know, and not only the government, to hackers. I mean, like, technology is infinitely hackable. You know, there's always bad guys out there. You know, you use credit cards. People hack Target to get your credit card info, then they sell them on forums. You know, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have credit cards, or you shouldn't use your credit cards at Target. You know, you build certain safeties in place, but usually the companies do, because they're the ones who suffer when they have those economic losses.
So clearly there's risks, there's rewards, but we can't put the jack back in the box here. The technology is going to get stronger and is here to stay. Kamal.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we're just at the very beginning of innovation in, like, what we call the Internet of Things, where everything is connected. Now, it's really beneficial to the user. I mean, and the thing is, fundamentally, it is a free market. Most of the things that will be using this, if you don't like it, don't use it. If enough people don't like it, there'll be companies that will provide alternative that don't have that technology in
That's
it.
until the government decides that everybody has to use it a certain way.
Exactly.
But Kamal, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
After the break, James Barrett, the author of Our Final Invention, Artificial Intelligence and the End of the Human Era, will join me to explain exactly why mass data collection should worry us. James Barrett, author of Our Final Invention, Artificial Intelligence and the End of the Human Era, joins me now. James, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just walk through a little bit of how this could go bad. Look, convenience is very appealing. That's why a lot of people tend not to worry as much about their privacy these days, despite the huge digital advances of our modern era. But how could smart technology in different appliances throughout the home come to be a problem? How could this become a sort of digital tyranny?
Well, a couple of things we need to think about. If the government asked you to give them your whereabouts all the time, to track yourself and send it to them, you'd probably object. But your smartphone does that. If the government asked you to send them all your texts and all your email correspondence, you'd object. You'd say, no, that you can't have that. But your provider, your service provider who gives you internet has that information. The government has figured out a way to get that information by going directly to Facebook, Google, and other vendors without having to subpoena you directly to get that information. So the government has gone around the Constitution. Bringing that home, you know, the devices in your home are gathering data about you all the time, and that data is for sale. There are 300 data brokers in the United States, and buying and selling data, personal data about you, is a $160 billion a year business. So if you're willing to give up your most intimate secrets to providers like Google or to the government, then you shouldn't have any problem with this.
Right, but if you can see how that obviously for some people is going to be a major issue. I want to ask you though about the regulatory components of this, especially when we're talking about things like thermostats, power. There's an environmental impact that the government will immediately be able to assess and then perhaps regulate. I wonder if you could just sort of take me down the path a bit of not just how this is a concern for our whereabouts and our privacy, but also it'll have effects on the consumer market. It'll have effects on how we perhaps use energy, what access to energy we'll have, and how the regulatory schemes that the government can institute will be much more draconian and severe because they know much more about how we're using our appliances and using heating in our home and such.
Well, the one big danger I see is that when you put everyone's home and you put all that data on one grid, in one grid, in one easy to get to place, it can be hacked. You know, Google gets hacked, the NSA gets hacked, Facebook regularly gets hacked, data is stolen. So all that information about your home, about your energy use, about when you're on vacation, about how many people are living in your home, when it gets hot, when it gets dark, that's just the first step. All that data is not going to be very secure, for one thing, and that's just the first step of big data invading your home. It's not just going to be the thermostat. It's going to be all the appliances. It's going to be your whereabouts, and it's all going to be, you know, that appliance on your wall, that thermostat, is going to be connected to your wireless router. So you could basically bet that all the information on your local network is available to whoever's running the system.
So it's possible to perhaps hop and hack, if you will, go from access to someone's smart thermostat and then connect into their, essentially the same grid that their computer is on. The same internet connectivity that connects one to the other can obviously become a security vulnerability. So that's a huge hole in all of this as well, that you'll have more devices that will, I assume, need password protection. But even with password protection, will be stored by a third party, and that third party is subject to hacking, and therefore your information can be retrieved that way.
Which is very dangerous when you think that you set your thermostat low when you go on vacation, so somebody's going to know when you're on vacation. And the other thing is, all this information that you're giving to the company that's putting the thermostat on your wall, all this information, not only can it be hacked, but it can be sold. As I said, data brokering is a $160 billion a year business, and these data brokers are compiling huge lists of people who have different needs. Now, some of them are innocuous, like Bob may be buying a new car this year, but some are a little more sensitive, like Bob may be getting an HIV test, sensitive medical information. And this data buying and selling can affect what offers you get on loans, how much interest you pay on loans, and whether or not you get insurance.
Now, James, those who are concerned about this entire process as it continues to evolve, they're trying to get the word out about this. I would just ask you, before we close here, it seems that at a minimum, choice should be allowed. If you don't want to be on this grid, you should be given that opportunity to say, look, I don't want my data stored. Do you think that that's feasible, given the fact that so far a lot of government agencies and we know now even more private sector companies are saying, look, you have to allow us to store this, and we're going to get access to it one way or another?
You know, we've got to put our foot down somewhere. Right now, your only weapon is that very brief terms of service. You know, when you're signing up for a new internet feature, a terms of service contract comes by, and it comes by very quickly, and suddenly you've given away a lot of your privacy. We need stronger safeguards for consumers. We need to be able to limit their access to our data. And we need to opt out of the smart grid. We need to opt out of smart houses. We need to have other options. And I think, you know, legislators are probably beginning to hear us when we complain about it.
All right, James, thank you very much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Technology makes all of our lives easier, but it also makes them much more transparent. Should we curb the ability of private or public entities to amass huge stockpiles of data on us? And at what cost? These are the questions we must continue to ask, because the truth often lies somewhere between the sensational and the mundane. And our mission is to find it. This has been Real News Investigates. Thank you for watching, America. Good night.